Welcome to Lawline. Lawline is a legal show hosted and sponsored by the attorneys of the law firm of Levin, Papantonio, Thomas, Mitchell, Rafferty, and Proctor. My name is Mark Proctor. I'll be your host for today's show, and with me is my friend and partner Brian Barr. This is a continuing show in our sequence of shows about the BP oil spill and the settlement surrounding that oil spill. Today, we're going to talk specifically about the rights of individuals and businesses in the state of Alabama. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark. Nice to see you today.
Good. I'm glad you're here. Brian is not only my friend and partner, but he plays an extraordinarily large role in the national BP litigation. As you know, the litigation is centered in Louisiana under the auspices and supervision of the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Louisiana. Judge Carl Barbier, the federal district court judge, is handling the BP litigation. Brian is one of the four lawyers, and our law firm is one of the four firms who are leading this litigation on behalf of all the plaintiffs throughout the Gulf Coast. We're very happy that Brian can be here today. He spends most of his time these days in New Orleans, and through his executive committee and the members of the plaintiff steering committee that serve under him, a very good thing has occurred in this litigation. There has been this class action settlement that you have heard about that was announced this past March that has moved forward into a settlement process that opened in June and is calculating settlement claims throughout the Gulf Coast pursuant to a negotiated methodology between the Plaintiff Steering Committee through Brian and his executive committee and BP. Today we want to take some time and talk to you about that settlement and how it affects your rights in the state of Alabama. Brian, let's talk. On prior shows we've talked about the class area being the Gulf Coast counties in Florida, the state of Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and four coastal counties in Texas. But detail for us, if you will, the class area as it pertains to the state of Alabama, and then explain the zones within that class area in Alabama.
Okay, Mark. Well, the explanation of the area itself is pretty simple. It's the entire state of Alabama, from the Gulf of Mexico down up to the borders with Tennessee. It's literally the entire state. But what we did is we took the state and we broke it out into zones. We've got a slide that we can showing all of the zones in the state of Alabama. That it basically shows the entire state. So what you're able to see there, and I'll focus in some, zoom in here in a little bit, but what you're able to see is you've got A zones on the beaches, so Orange Beach, Gulf Shores. You're talking about Zone A, which is the area that causation's presumed. You don't have to do anything. If you are a business in Zone A, it's presumed your losses are caused by the spill, no matter what type of business you are. And then there's different risk transfer premiums that we've talked about a lot for different types of businesses in Zone A. Then you move into Zone B, which is that large purple area. It's parts of Foley, but you can see it right there, the large purple area on the east coast side of Mobile Bay. That's a highly tourist area of Alabama. And so what we did there is that's a Zone B. So if you're a tourism business in Zone B, your losses are presumed to be caused by the spill, and you get the RTPs, risk transfer premiums, that go along with that. And then in Zone C, you can see that basically goes up to I-10 as it goes around the state all the way up to you get to Battleship Parkway, crossing Mobile Bay. That's a presumed zone, actually. That's purple if you've got a business there, going into the state of Mississippi. So basically I-10 south. And then there are some feeder roads coming down from Montgomery, Birmingham, some areas that come down to the coast, come down to the coast towns of Alabama. And if you're a business on one of those roads, or in very close proximity to one of those roads, then you are in the Zone C. So that's how that works with the state of Alabama. Then the rest of Alabama is Zone D. And as you can see looking at the map, that's the vast majority of the state.
North of the interstate.
North of the interstate. And so there are higher qualifications for Zone D, but if you do qualify, you get paid. There's not a question, where you're certifying that your losses were caused by the spill. What we negotiated in this settlement was a formula to determine whether or not your losses were caused by the spill. So it doesn't matter why you were actually down in 2010 under the formula. It just matters, do you meet the formula?
I think that's a great point that you raise. Obviously, you and I do a lot of public speaking about this settlement and how it impacts the rights of people. And one of the issues and questions that we get asked repeatedly is by people who live or work a fair distance from the waters of the Gulf of Mexico, asking the question, look, we recognize that this spill occurred in the middle of a recession. We're awfully far from the coast. We can't certify or swear that our losses were due to the spill. We had losses. They may have been due to the recession. They may have been due to the spill. They may have been due to both. And because we're not sure, we are hesitant to make a claim. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, and we understood that was going to be the mindset of people, but what we were trying to do with this settlement was to take the subjectivity out. We knew that this spill caused such a wide range of economic damage, and it wasn't just the businesses on the beach that were impacted, because those businesses have employees, and then those employees are making less money, and they're spending less money in places where they go around their homes further away from the coast, and there was just this domino effect throughout the state. And so instead of arguing over whether or not somebody was actually caused by the spill, we came up with a formula. And so the formula, and it's agreed to by BP. It's been preliminarily approved by the court, hopefully finally approved by the court here soon. But everybody agrees that if you meet those tests under the formula, your losses were caused by the spill. And for Zone D, what that is you have to show that I don't want to get too detailed on it, but you basically have to show in just using gross revenue, looking at any 3 consecutive months between May through December of 2010, you have to show that you were down 15% compared to either 2009, an average of 2008 and 9, or an average of 2007, 2008, and 2009, and that you came back up 10% in those same 3 months in 2011. And if you meet that basic gross revenue test, you qualify for compensation.
So let me interrupt you a second. Let's just take an example that seems that it may be instructive here. If you are let's say a landscape company in Birmingham, Alabama, your work is within the confines of the city of Birmingham. You do nothing on the coast. You do nothing for anybody who has any interests on the coast, and your business happened to be down just the way you described with your example of the economic test for Zone D. Are you in? Are you out? What is your status?
You're in if you meet the test. And one of the ways and things I stress when I talk to people about this is don't just look at how you did overall in 2010. That can be very deceptive as far as whether or not you qualify. Because I've seen examples of businesses that were actually up overall in 2010 because they had a very good front half of the year, or they had a very good December, something that caused them to be really high up in 2010. But when you break it down on a month-by-month basis, there are 3 months where they were down 15% compared to those other years, and they came back up in 2011. So it's very important that you break it down by month and don't just ask was I up, was I down in 2010? That's the wrong question to be asking.
And I guess that's one reason why it's not as simple as just an individual or business owner just looking at your own records and trying to figure this out. You really need it looked at by somebody that knows the settlement methodology and how to break down the analysis. Would that be correct?
If you want to know whether or not you qualify prior to filing a claim, then that's absolutely correct.
Okay.
And that's, I would urge everybody to have somebody look at it, because what's being offered here is a chance for particularly the state of Alabama to get a significant influx of recovery from BP. There's been a lot of things that have been going on in the Gulf economy for a long period of years. The state of Alabama, the state of Florida were hit particularly hard with the housing market. So there's a lot going on, and this is a chance for a lot of businesses to, if they just take some action, to get a significant economic recovery from BP, which would be a significant influx of money into these Gulf economies, which is something the state of Alabama could use desperately right now.
And as you said before, this is a negotiated settlement. These formulas are negotiated. The economic tests have been negotiated. BP knows about them. They approve of them. The court knows about them. As Brian said, the court has already granted preliminary approval, and hopefully there will be a final approval coming soon. So I think it's important for everybody watching to realize that this is not some sort of secretive thing. Everybody who has been involved in this settlement process knows about these tests, has specifically agreed to the test. So if you live or work in Alabama, north of Interstate 10, you are in Zone D, and if you can meet that economic test, then you can prove causation relative to this settlement, and then go to the next step, which is the calculation of damages. If you meet the causation test that Brian has enunciated for Zone D, then it doesn't matter whether you can say for sure or whether you believe for sure that all of your losses were related to the spill and not the economy. Under the negotiated provisions of the spill, you are in as far as causation. And if you can calculate a loss for 2010 under the settlement methodology, you can be paid compensation for your losses under this settlement. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say, and it's all types of businesses. It's landscapers, construction companies. We've seen farmers. I mean, all types of businesses. It's fairly, there is a small set of businesses that have been excluded, but that is the vast minority. The reality is a substantial majority of the businesses are all included in this settlement. This is their right to recovery. And if BP, if the court grants final approval, BP is going to get a release for all of these businesses. So, what I tell people is, don't let them get that release from you for free. Make them buy it.
Now, this is very important. This is very important. Pay attention now, because under the class action law, as Brian has just stated, BP is going to get a release for your claim if the judge approves this settlement as being fair. They're going to get that release whether or not you make a claim. So it's foolishness not to at least take a look and see if you will qualify for compensation, because you are going to end up by law releasing BP from liability for any and all damage occasioned by you or your business. So you might as well get your case evaluated. Let a lawyer look at it. Lawyers are handling these cases on a contingency fee, and what that means to you is you're going to pay nothing unless you actually recover. So it will cost you nothing. It will cost you no lawyer's fees. It will cost you no costs, no accounting fees, because typically lawyers will advance that money and eat those costs unless you actually recover money. If you think of it that way, it will cost no money for you to have your case evaluated to see if you can pass the economic tests and qualify for compensation in this settlement. So for those of you who reside or work in businesses north of Interstate 10 in the state of Alabama, you are part of this class action settlement by definition, and if you can pass the economic tests and calculate a damage for 2010, you can qualify for compensation under this settlement. It's very, very important. There are some deadlines. Deadlines are a year and a half away. Currently, Judge Barbier has said that he'll receive claims up until the middle of April 2014. So you have time to do it, but recognize there are a lot of people all across the Gulf Coast in other states, Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida, and in a few counties in Texas that are also part of this class. And people are making claims. I think you said, Brian, last week that 70,000 claims had been filed in the settlement facility. Mm-hmm. So there are lots of claims being filed. Don't wait too long. There's a long line there. They're not going to run out of money. BP is obligated to pay whatever the settlement is, but in terms of time, the quicker you can get your case evaluated, and if you can calculate damage, the quicker you can file for compensation. So it's something that you need to be aware of, and it's something that you need to act on. It's simply not going to cost you any money to have your case evaluated. Now, Brian, we talked about the different zones in Alabama, and we've just gone through Zone D. Let's talk about Zone C. Zone C, I believe you said, is south of Interstate 10.
Right.
Tell us about the economic tests and how they work for Zone C.
Well, for Zone C, it's the same exact test as Zone B, so we can talk about them at the same time.
Okay.
Your basic test is the same idea of D, which is you're looking at the 3 consecutive months, but the numbers come down a little bit. It's 8.5% down on 10 and 5% up on 11 when you're looking at those 3 consecutive months, and that's because the standards are a little lower because we're closer to the shore. And as we get closer to the shore, the standards come down until you get all the way down to A, where everybody, no matter what kind of business you are, you don't have to show any impact in the months. It's just you go straight to the compensation side. So that's Zone C. You meet those basic little tests. There's also some other tests in there, what we call the customer mix test. There's, if you don't have 8.5%, you're 5 and 5, 5% down, 5% up. Then there's some other tests you have to meet causation. But even if you don't meet the 8.5% down, 5% up, or the 15% down, 10% up, there are other ways to show eligibility beyond just those tests. That's why it's really important to have your claim looked at by somebody who understands what this settlement is and what it does, and not somebody that's just saying, hey, let me look at it. Because there's a lot of people that would like to look at it, but there's also a lot of people that really don't understand what this settlement is. And so I would encourage everybody to find someone who understands this settlement, to have them look at their claim to figure out whether or not they qualify. Because again, we get back to the release idea, and this kind of gets back to the overarching principle of people being nervous about filing a claim. BP will happily accept their release. BP wants their release, and in BP's perfect world, they get their release without making them pay for it. And that's why it's everybody's obligation out there to make BP pay for that release, file the claim, and do what they need to do to hold BP accountable in this situation. BP is continuing to run commercials in the Gulf that say, we want to make things right. Well, this is the opportunity to make BP make it right. This is, if the court grants final approval, this is going to be the avenue, and the only avenue for people that haven't already opted out to recover, and it's very important that they do that.
Let's talk about that opt-out. There's been a lot of press in the last month about November 1 being the last date you can opt out, and I want you to share with our viewers what that means, because it's become obvious to me that there's some confusion about whether the opt-out date is the end of the claims period. Our viewers heard me talk about a few minutes ago that you can file a claim up through the middle of April 2014, but I want to make sure we dispel any misinformation about what the opt-out period was and whether it affects the ability to file a claim.
Yeah, all the opt-out does is that's people that say, I don't want to be involved in the class settlement. I want to litigate my claim. I want to go to trial in 2020 or whenever they get to trial. That's what the opt-out is. And so that's for people to say, I reject the settlement. I don't want it. Everybody else that didn't reject it, they're in it. And they have until the earliest, April of 2014, to file a claim, unless you're in the seafood program. If you're in the seafood compensation program, which is basically your fishermen, deckhands, they have till 30 days after final approval, and there's reasons for that having to do with the way that money's allocated. That's a guaranteed fund of money, unlike everything else, which is an uncapped fund. But that's the opt-out date. It really has no bearing on the ability to file a claim and the timing of filing a claim, other than the fact if you file one, you've excluded yourself. But the court did just recently enter an order allowing people to revoke their opt-out and come back in by mid-December. So if you have filed an opt-out and you're having second thoughts and you want to figure out, maybe I don't want to wait 6-7 years to try my case. Maybe I'd like to go ahead and get recovery now and start to put all this behind me. You have until I think it's December 15 to revoke your opt-out and come back into the settlement.
It's very important. So if I understand correctly, then if you did not opt out by November 1, you are in this settlement. This settlement becomes then the only mechanism to obtain compensation from the BP oil spill. And so I just want everybody to know, because there has been misinformation, so much press about the opt-out period. There are people thinking that, well, as of November 1, it's over. That is not the case. That was simply, as Brian said, the date by which you needed to get out of this settlement if you wanted to go to court. You have plenty of time to file a claim in the settlement, and so it's very important that you avail yourself of this opportunity to at least find out whether you have a claim. So for kind of review purposes, you've got 4 zones in the state of Alabama. Zone A, closest to the waters of the Gulf of Mexico, where if you can calculate a loss for 2010, that loss, no matter whether you're a tourism business, a non-tourism business, is presumed to be caused by the spill. Zone B, those couple of areas that you pointed out, near the coast but landward of Zone A, you have an economic test. If you are a non-tourist related business, if you're a tourist related business and can calculate a loss for 2010, that loss is presumed.
That's right. If you're tourist in Zone B, it's a presumed
Right.
loss.
If you're not tourist, then you've got to pass the same economic test as Brian enunciated for Zone C. Then if you move landward of Zone B, this is now the land and property south of Interstate 10 that is not Zone B or A, you're in Zone C. You've got to pass that economic test that Brian talked about, down 8.5%, back up 5%. If you can pass that test, you have met causation, and you can go to the calculation of damage. And then for the balance of the state of Alabama, Zone D, that is the land lying north of Interstate 10 up to the northern borders of the state, if you can calculate the economic test by down 15%, up 10%, then you are by negotiation in the settlement and can calculate a loss. So folks in Alabama have tremendous opportunities, it seems to me, to calculate damage under this spill, whether or not they have questions about what really caused their problem. So I think it's very, very important that citizens of the state of Alabama, people who live in Alabama, people who work in Alabama, Make yourselves aware of what this settlement may offer you, and have your case evaluated. Brian, we've got a couple minutes left. Tell our viewers where we go from here, what's going on with the litigation, what we're hoping to see out of Judge Barbier.
Well, right now we're waiting for final approval, and we hope we will get that relatively soon. We've got a trial scheduled for February. That's the limitation trial, which has some, because of some rights that were reserved in this settlement, some bearing on this settlement. But that's where the major place where the litigation is going. But right now the focus of the vast majority of people impacted by this bill needs to be on this settlement. And once we get final approval, then we just go forward from there. But I'm hoping that people out there watching will get motivated and will do what they need to do, because this literally could be worth billions of dollars to the state of Alabama.
Yeah, it's a very big, important issue, not only to the economy of the state of Alabama, but to the economy of the entire Gulf Coast. Make sure you understand what your rights are. Get your financial records together. You're going to need your records from 2007 through 2011, monthly profit and loss statements, tax returns, some other things, but these are things that most businesses will readily have or can get. Have your case evaluated, at least find out where you are. Lawyers like us do this on a contingency fee. It will cost you absolutely nothing to have it evaluated. Folks, pay attention. This is very important. It's our job at this point to get information out. Brian and I will do more shows advising you of your rights, but have your case evaluated and do it now. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, everybody.